At a time when American laws, like the Comstock Laws, banned contraceptive devices and information from women, specifically women immigrants in poverty, Margaret Sanger, a social activist and nurse, rose as a leader, fighting against such laws. Because of her defiance, she was jailed many times. This set her back, but eventually she prevailed, opening the first birth control clinic in 1916, which was a huge immediate triumph. Today, despite the controversy about Sanger's motivations, her long-lasting legacy has resulted in the legalization of birth control and other contraceptive methods, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and other facilities located throughout the U.S., and the modification of the Comstock Laws. But let's start from the beginning.
Margaret Sanger was born 7 of 11 children on September 14, 1879, and she grew up in the time of many medical advances, along with the start of new beliefs, one being the theory of eugenics. She also grew up exposed directly to the suffering her mother's body faced because of excessive pregnancies. This had a huge impact on Sanger as a child, and she understood that her mother did not have the means necessary to prevent such pregnancies. The toll that pregnancies took on her body, Sanger believed, was the cause of her mother's early demise. This belief stemmed deep motivation for Sanger's cause, and she wanted to do everything she could to help women much like her mother. However, it was after she went to school to become a nurse and moved to New York that she, in the slums of the city, was truly exposed to the hardships of women around her, and where she found her passion and direction for her movement. Sanger has often spoke about a woman she met as a nurse, Sadie Sachs. Miss Sachs was like many other women that came to the office, pregnant and searching for some way to prevent it, but Sanger was not permitted to give out any contraceptive information. Miss Sachs had performed a self-inflicted abortion and was given antibiotics. She was then, again like many, advised to stay abstinent. Sanger was assigned to check up on Miss Sachs a few months later in her home, where she found her dead from yet another self-inflicted abortion. Sanger was furious, and she knew that from now on she could not stand by and watch these women struggle like this. After the tragic scene Sanger was faced with, she found herself walking among her city. She recalls her thoughts. Its pains and griefs crowded in upon me, a moving picture rolled before my eyes with photographic clearness. Women writhing in travail to bring forth little babies. The babies themselves, naked and hungry, wrapped in newspapers to keep them from the cold. White coffins, black coffins. Coffins interminably passing in never-ending succession. The scenes piled one upon another on another. I could bear it no longer. Making her first big move around the same time she and her first husband separated, supposedly because of Sanger's passion for her cause, Sanger published The Woman Rebel in 1914 to spread information about preventing conception. She saw how many women were dying of self-inflicted abortions, and she felt she had to do something to prevent further needless deaths. In The Woman Rebel, she promoted contraception, empowered women, and challenged the laws against contraception. 2 years after The Woman Rebel was published in 1916, Sanger and her sister opened the very first birth control clinic in America. Over 100 women and men showed up at the opening of the clinic in Brooklyn to receive consultation. Sanger and the other women working at the clinic were soon arrested for recalcitrance of the New York State Penal, but she did not give up. Soon after she was released, she reopened and was arrested yet again for being a public nuisance. She was immediately put on trial and told she could receive a suspended sentence if she promises to abide by the law. She said, "I cannot respect the law as it exists today," and she chose a 30-day prison sentence instead of a $5,000 fine. A year after she finished her sentence, she petitioned for a writ of error at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the following year she received a notice that the Supreme Court had dismissed her case.
On its own is not a negative concept, now being that we want to encourage the healthy, the smart, the best of all different races. Sanger, her biggest influences in terms of eugenics come from her intimate friend, Havelock Ellis, who was another British philosopher and science fiction writer. And he was heavily into the idea, the philosophy of eugenics. Eugenics was not necessarily racial categorization. Nowadays, we consider that it is negative and it's all about racial prejudice. At the time, and especially in Margaret Sanger's writings, her discriminatory factors were not so much racial as disabled. So I kind of have, in my mind, split it up into two parts. There's racial eugenics and there's disability eugenics. racism of that sort, where the whites are considered to be superior and everyone else is less than, was very much the mainstream thought in America conversation. It was not considered rude or racist. It was just the facts. The more troubling thing with Margaret Sanger comes with her philosophy and practice of disability eugenics. She certainly had a strong hand in the sterilization, voluntary and otherwise, of several tens of thousands of feeble-minded Americans. Now, the definition of feeble-minded is a bit obscure. My reading is that it probably means people with Down syndrome, people with paranoid schizophrenia, people with just incredibly low IQ. She wrote a book in 1922 called The Pivot of Civilization, and that's considered her eugenics culmination, I suppose. And she does talk about this idea of minimizing dysgenic offspring, which is just what it sounds like. She's saying basically we need more healthy, we need more strong, we need more smart. Her greatest hatred was for large families. She's incredibly bitter about her own childhood and about her own mother dying so young. And I think she just had an absolute disgust for any family that was over 4 or 5. Most particularly when that family could not afford that many children.
Despite the challenges Sanger faced, such as criticism, many arrests, the death of her only daughter, and separation from her first husband, she continued to push forward with much enthusiasm and persistence. In 1921, she founded the American Birth Control League, but resigned in 1928 because she knew she was seen as too radical in her views. She was moving at a different pace. A year after her resignation, she started the National Committee on Federal Legislation for Birth Control to lobby for physicians to have the right to hand out contraceptives legally. And 10 years later, that right was approved. After tireless fighting, the Supreme Court finally legalized birth control for married couples in 1965. People were finally able to protect themselves with the power of choice. Women could control their fertility and prevent childbearing if they wanted to. Sanger was overjoyed. However, she knew her battle was far from over. She continued for the next year, giving speeches and promoting birth control and contraception. Sadly, September 6, 1966, Margaret Sanger died in a Tuscan nursing home at the age of 86.
Today, there continues to be controversies about Margaret Sanger and her movement, especially towards her involvement with eugenics. In Sanger's time, the idea of eugenics was common, and she grew up submerged in this belief, and many others around her shared her views. However, her actions, supposedly stemmed from her beliefs, have put her still in a lower respect of some. Currently, Planned Parenthood chooses not to speak of the eugenics side of Sanger to avoid bad publicity, and in some cases, they deny that Sanger had any involvement at all. They try to only show and speak of the brighter sides of Sanger and the good she has done for Planned Parenthood and women in the U.S.
Margaret Sanger's heroic fight has impacted the lives of many. Women now have the ability and right to control their own fertility. As of 2014, 60% of American women use some sort of contraception. Family size has drastically changed from an average of 7 kids per family to an average of 2.5 in the United States. And it is very likely without Sanger, the U.S. population would be even greater than its average of 323 million. Even if much of Sanger's motivations came from her controversial beliefs, without Sanger's leadership, her legacy today may not be that women in America are now able to control their fertility. Without her, our lives as Americans would be very different.